bet that we all have our own highway to hell stories. You know, those roads that instantly stress us out. Mine begins with the spaghetti bowl of the DC Beltway. I know there's another one, but there's one in DC too. There are those points where the Atlanta highway is 20 lanes wide. And then there is the gladiatorial battles, otherwise known as the interstates around DFW. My personal nemesis for many years was the tangle of 67, 167, I-40, and I-30 in North Little Rock. My commute required navigating a very short stretch where the three major highways merged and diverged like somebody had kicked over an anthill. Every day, I had to merge on one highway, immediately cross over 4 lanes in less than half a mile to switch highways, and then watch over my shoulder for the other highway coming into it before crossing back over in the next mile and a half so that I could exit. This maneuvering, of course, happened during rush hour, so it was either moving at a crawl in bumper-to-bumper traffic or at breakneck speeds. The 3-mile stretch from my on-ramp to my off-ramp felt like a daily obstacle course, testing my reflexes and patience. It won't surprise you that some drivers along this gauntlet did not exactly meet my standards of road etiquette. They wouldn't let me merge in. They'd cut me off. And my favorite, changing lanes without checking your blind spot. It didn't take much for the frustration to boil over. Grip the wheel, maybe shout a choice word or two, maybe, or let my mood sour the rest of the morning. And I believe, from what I've heard, that I'm not alone here. Of course we react, right? We expect everyone to follow the rules. Road rules exist for our safety. And this kind of thing could make us late for work, but it's more than an inconvenience, it's dangerous. We're concerned about our safety and maybe the safety of our child in the back seat. Suddenly, that other driver becomes a threat to us. They're the enemy, triggering our survival instinct. Fight or flight mode kicks in, and we're frightened, but we're also trapped in a vehicle going 60 miles an hour, so we can't go anywhere. All that fear has nowhere to go but anger. But here's the kicker. We can do nothing about it. Those other drivers can't hear us. They probably don't even notice, and most of them probably don't care. So, this is a small glimpse of a larger truth about our human condition. We often suffer because of circumstances beyond our control. And it is so easy to let those moments dictate our mood and choices for hours. It's hard to let go, though, isn't it? We know we're right. We know they were wrong or selfish or just arrogant. Why shouldn't we be angry with them? Well, it took me a long time to realize that by holding on to that anger, I was giving a complete stranger power over my entire day. My child in the back seat absorbed my anxiety, and my coworkers bore the brunt of my lingering frustration. And there is a way to free ourselves from this kind of tension, but surprisingly, it's not by fighting back or suppressing our feelings and pretending that they're not there. It's actually to yielding to our anger. When we acknowledge our fear and our powerlessness in those kinds of situations, we can also accept our fury. See, our anger is just the normal reaction of our brain trying to protect us in what it perceives as a dangerous situation. our brain's just doing its job. We might even reassure ourselves a little bit. You know, that was scary. I'm glad we're okay. When we yield to grace for ourselves and others, we give ourselves permission to feel, to react, and to be human. When Jesus tells us to love our enemies, he is not asking us to endorse harm or tolerate abuse. He's inviting us to yield, not in weakness, but in strength. To yield our anger, to yield our right to retaliation, and to make room for grace. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. These are not passive acts. Each represents an active choice to yield our instinctive reactions and instead choose compassion. When we yield to grace, we stop letting others control our narrative. We open space to understand, to empathize, and to heal. But yielding doesn't mean giving in to injustice. It does not mean we accept abuse or oppression, as this scripture is sometimes used to suggest. When Jesus proclaims, "If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also," he is not endorsing victimization. Instead, he is showing us how to reclaim our agency. In his cultural context, turning the other cheek was a way of asserting equality. It disrupted the power dynamic. It forced the oppressor, usually a Roman soldier, to look their victim in the eye, to see the humanity of the oppressed. Jesus teaches us that yielding to grace is not passive submission, but active resistance through love. Returning to the traffic analogy, remember how upset we were about the driver cutting us off? I mean, we've all been there, right? We've had that feeling. Now imagine you're driving along safely, doing nothing wrong, and the police pull you over for no apparent reason. You might wonder about your taillight or something, but honestly, the blue lights, just thinking about it gets your heart racing, right? A woman once shared a story I'll never forget. She worked for a state agency and was driving a state-owned vehicle back to the office accompanied by 3 coworkers. But just a couple of miles from their office, she was pulled over. She was mortified. Through the course of the traffic stop, it became clear that she had not committed any violations. The officer pulled her over to verify she was authorized to drive the state vehicle. Though she wore a state-issued uniform shirt, had her state-issued employee ID, and it was her name on the checkout paperwork, the officer struggled until the coworkers vouched for her. Because she was a black woman driving a state vehicle. The fear and helplessness she felt were magnitudes beyond a traffic annoyance. Her very legitimacy was questioned until her white coworkers vouched for her. Even though they all wore the same uniform, they all had the same IDs, and her name was on the paperwork. Now, I know some of us struggle to believe that something like this could happen. And I understand. When we can't fathom the mindset rooted in racism, it is hard to accept that somebody else could do something like this. But this story came to me this week as I have listened over and over to colleagues and peers across the country describe rising level of fear as acts of hate and intolerance seem to gain new acceptance. In moments like these, Jesus' teaching reveals its radical power. He calls us not only to yield to grace personally, but to build systems of grace that extend fairness and equality to all. Just as traffic laws create order and safety on the road, Jesus calls us to level the playing field, offering stability and justice in a world that often feels anything but. In Luke, when Jesus preached on the plain, not on the mount, he physically demonstrated that all are equal before God. The ground was level, not only a geographical observation, but a theological statement. Returning to our driving analogy, traffic laws are a remarkable example of how rules create equity and safety for all. These laws don't favor the sleek sports car over the old minivan, nor do they give extra privileges to the experienced driver over the newcomer. Whether you're driving a luxury SUV or a rusty old pickup, the rules apply equally. Stop means stop, yield means yield, speed limits are for everyone, or you lose your driving privileges. These regulations are not about control for control's sake. They are designed to ensure that everyone on the road can travel safely, regardless of their vehicle or their status. When we all abide by the same rules, we create an environment where everyone can move forward and where everyone has the same opportunity to reach their destination. I mean, consider how well it works. Have you really ever thought about it? Think about this next time you're going down a 2-lane highway. Here we are in our 1-ton vehicles, passing each other at high rates of speed, and the only thing that separates us is a painted line and a few feet of space. It works amazingly well. Imagine if traffic laws were only suggestions. The roads would become battlegrounds where the strongest or the most aggressive ruled. Those who are vulnerable, the elderly driver, the cautious teenager, the family in a small car, would be at constant risk. But because we all collectively yield some of our freedom of movement, we create a shared trust that protects us all. Just as traffic laws promote fairness and safety in driving, societal laws and policies are intended to create a level playing field in life. When laws uphold justice, when they address systemic inequalities and protect the marginalized, they function as the road signs and traffic lights of our communal journey. They remind us to yield, to stop, to proceed with caution, ensuring that no one is left behind or pushed aside. When we yield to grace, we are not only making room for others, but also advocating for systems that reflect God's justice. We become active participants in building a world where everyone has a clear path forward, like the best traffic systems. So as we navigate our daily lives, I hope you'll remember that yielding to grace is not just a personal practice, but a communal calling. It's about creating space for everyone to merge into the flow of God's love, safely, equally, and with dignity. Because Yielding to grace is not about giving up. It's about giving over to God's love, to God's peace, and to the radical equality that Jesus modeled for us all.